Far above mainland Europe, roughly halfway between the northern coast of Norway and the North Pole, lies Svalbard, a frozen archipelago where geography, law, history, and geopolitics meet in one of the most unusual inhabited places on Earth. It belongs to Norway, but it does not function like ordinary Norway. It is remote, but internationally important. It has small settlements, yet it sits inside major debates about Arctic access, environmental protection, scientific research, and national influence. The largest island is Spitsbergen, a name once used for much of the archipelago, but Svalbard also includes islands such as Nordøstlandet, Egøya, Barentsøya, Bear Island, and several smaller Arctic outposts. On a map, these islands look like lonely fragments near the top of the world. In reality, they form a rare kind of frontier, not lawless, not empty, but governed under rules that make Svalbard different from almost anywhere else in Europe. Svalbard's physical environment explains why life there is so unusual. Around 60% of the archipelago is covered by glaciers, and the islands are shaped by mountains, fjords, sea ice, and long seasonal extremes. The main settlement, Longyearbyen, sits on the west coast of Spitsbergen in Jordan, one of the more accessible parts of the territory. Its location matters because the western side of Svalbard receives some warming influence from the Atlantic, including the tail end of the Gulf Stream system. That does not make Svalbard mild, but it does make it warmer than many places at the same latitude. Without that influence, permanent settlement would be even harder. The result is a strange Arctic balance, a place cold enough for glaciers and polar bears, but accessible enough for airports, research centers, tourists, and year-round communities. The human story of Svalbard began with extraction rather than settlement. In the 17th and 18th centuries, whalers sailed into these northern waters and used the islands as a base. They were not building a normal society, they were using Svalbard as a practical platform for work in the Arctic seas. When the whaling era declined, the archipelago was largely abandoned again. Its modern inhabited history began later, when coal mining started at the beginning of the 20th century. Coal changed everything because it gave people a reason to stay through the darkness and cold. Communities such as Longyearbyen, Barentsburg, and Pyramiden grew from this industrial logic. These were not towns that slowly developed around farms, trade routes, or royal capitals. They were purpose-built Arctic outposts, designed around mines, workers, supply chains, and survival in a place where almost nothing is easy. The key to Svalbard's modern identity is the Svalbard Treaty of 1920. The treaty recognized Norwegian sovereignty, and in 1925 Norway formally made Svalbard part of the Kingdom of Norway. But the treaty also created a special system. It gave citizens and companies from treaty countries equal rights to engage in certain economic activities, and it restricted military use of the archipelago. This is why Svalbard is Norwegian, but not simply another Norwegian region. It is administered directly through an appointed governor rather than being part of a normal Norwegian county. It is also outside the Schengen area, the Nordic Passport Union, and the European Economic Area. So when people say Svalbard belongs to Norway, that is true. But the more interesting truth is that Norwegian sovereignty there operates under an international legal framework with unusual limits and obligations. That treaty structure helps explain why Svalbard still has a visible Russian presence. The Norwegian company Store Norsk and Russia's Arktikugol remain the main mining companies associated with the archipelago. Barentsburg is still known as a Russian mining community, while Pyramiden became famous as a former Soviet settlement, now remembered for its abandoned Arctic atmosphere. These places matter because they show how Svalbard's legal status turns economic activity into something larger than business. A mine can also become a symbol of presence. A settlement can become a statement that a country is still part of the Arctic story. Norway is sovereign, but the treaty allows foreign commercial participation, and that gives Svalbard a geopolitical dimension much larger than its population. In the Arctic, flags are not always raised through military bases. Sometimes they appear through workers' housing, research stations, company offices, and long-standing settlements. Over the last several decades, Svalbard has been moving away from a future dominated by coal. Mining still matters historically and politically, but research and tourism have become increasingly important. Longyearbyen now acts as a gateway for scientists, students, visitors, and logistics. The University Center in Svalbard supports Arctic education and research, making the archipelago a living classroom for climate science, geology, biology, and polar technology. New York Ålesund, once linked to mining, is now a major research settlement. Hornsund hosts a Polish research station. Other remote sites are used by rotating teams rather than permanent populations. This shift is significant because Svalbard has become a place where the Arctic is measured, studied, and interpreted. The same ice, wildlife, and weather that once made the region difficult now make it scientifically valuable. One of the clearest symbols of Svalbard's global role is the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. Built into the Arctic environment, it stores backup copies of seeds from around the world. The idea is simple but powerful. If regional seed banks are damaged by war, disaster, mismanagement, or environmental change, the vault provides a deeper reserve of agricultural biodiversity. Svalbard was chosen because it is remote, politically stable, and naturally cold. Those qualities turn an isolated Arctic mountain into a kind of insurance policy for humanity's food systems. The seed vault also changes how we should think about Svalbard. This is not just a distant place with dramatic scenery. It is connected to farms, crops, and food security across the planet. Its remoteness is not a weakness in this case, it is the reason it can serve a global purpose. Svalbard's ecosystem is fragile because Arctic life is highly adapted to narrow windows of opportunity. During the polar night, darkness dominates. During the summer, the midnight sun gives plants and animals a short but intense season for feeding, breeding, and growth. Seabirds use the archipelago as an important breeding ground. Polar bears, Svalbard reindeer, Arctic foxes, and marine mammals are part of the wider Arctic web of life. But this environment does not recover quickly from disturbance. Foot traffic, pollution, careless landings, or repeated disruption of wildlife can leave effects that last far longer than similar damage in warmer regions. That is why protection is so extensive. 7 national parks and 23 nature reserves cover about 2/3 of the archipelago. Svalbard's wilderness may look vast and tough, but in ecological terms it is delicate. Tourism creates one of Svalbard's biggest modern tensions. Visitors come for glaciers, fjords, abandoned mining towns, polar landscapes, northern lights, midnight sun, and the feeling of standing near the edge of the inhabited world. Tourism brings money and attention, which can help replace some of the economic role once played by coal. But it also brings risk. More people mean more pressure on landing sites, more disturbance to wildlife, more ship traffic, and more chances for accidents in an unforgiving environment. In February 2024, Norway announced new tourism rules, including a maximum of 200 people on a ship, to protect Svalbard's flora and fauna. That limit reflects a basic Arctic reality: scale changes impact. A small expedition can be managed carefully. A large flow of visitors can overwhelm places that were never built for mass tourism. Daily life and movement in Svalbard are shaped by the absence of roads between settlements. This is not a place where communities are linked by highways or even rough tracks. Travel depends on snowmobiles, boats, and aircraft, depending on season, weather, distance, and ice conditions. Svalbard Airport is the main gateway, reinforcing Longyearbyen's role as the practical center of the archipelago. This transport reality affects everything: groceries, emergency response, research logistics, tourism planning, medical evacuation, and the psychological feeling of distance. A settlement may not be far away by ordinary map measurements, but in Svalbard, distance is measured in darkness, wind, snow, fuel, sea conditions, and risk. Infrastructure exists, but it is thin. Modern life is possible, yet constantly negotiated with the Arctic environment. Svalbard is often described through contradictions because contradictions are the core of the place. It is Norwegian, but outside several systems that normally define Norway's relationship with Europe. It is demilitarized under treaty restrictions, yet geopolitically sensitive. It is remote, but tied to global food security through the seed vault and global climate research through its scientific stations. It has a history of coal extraction, but much of its territory is protected wilderness. It attracts tourists because it feels wild, yet tourism must be controlled to keep that wilderness intact. Even its identity can be confusing. Svalbard is the archipelago, Spitsbergen is the largest island, and older sources sometimes use Spitsbergen for the whole group. Understanding Svalbard means accepting that it does not fit neatly into ordinary categories of country, colony, wilderness, town, research base, or tourist destination. Svalbard matters because it concentrates many of the 21st century's Arctic questions into one small archipelago. Who governs remote northern territory? How should economic access be balanced with sovereignty? How can fragile ecosystems be protected while tourism grows? What replaces extractive industries when coal loses its central role? How do scientists study climate change in the very places where it is most visible? And how do international agreements survive when strategic interest in the Arctic increases? Svalbard does not answer all of those questions, but it forces them into view. Its glaciers, settlements, treaty rules, research stations, wildlife protections, and foreign presences make it more than a frozen curiosity. It is a preview of the Arctic's future, a place where environment, law, science, and power are no longer separate stories, but one connected reality. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.